and Elvis Presley. Just saying the name brings up images. The curled lip, the swiveling hips, and the clothes. Always the clothes. This guy from Tupelo, Mississippi became a global fashion force. He sold over 1 billion records, which is a number so big, it's hard to even picture. He bought Graceland when he was just 22 years old, already a megastar. His first single on RCA, Heartbreak Hotel, shot straight to #1. People went wild for him. But not everyone in a good way. Many adults in the 1950s saw him as a threat. He was too wild, too suggestive. And his clothes, they were part of that rebellion. Think about it. Elvis only performed outside the United States a handful of times, mostly in Canada. Yet his style, his specific way of dressing traveled everywhere. It went across oceans, behind the Iron Curtain, into places he never even visited. How did that happen? How did one man's wardrobe, from a relatively isolated career geographically, manage to change how young people, and eventually designers, dressed all over the world? Was it just the music? Or did his clothes play a silent, powerful role, speaking a universal language of cool and rebellion? How much of what we see in fashion today, from rock stars to high street trends, owes a nod to a man who passed away back in 1977? We see echoes of him everywhere, in ways we might not even consciously realize. It's a style that became a cultural shorthand, a visual language understood across borders and generations. And number 17, how did Elvis's style become a blueprint for fashion's future? Elvis Presley didn't just wear clothes. He built a whole visual language that fashion designers and musicians would borrow from for decades to come. Think of him as an unintentional fashion prophet. He wasn't thinking about trends or seasons. He was just being Elvis, but in doing so, he laid down some fundamental rules for what stage presence could look like and how clothing could amplify charisma. This wasn't just about what looked good on him, it was about what his clothes said. They spoke of rebellion, luxury, and a kind of theatrical masculinity that was new and exciting. For example, his famous jumpsuits, especially those from the 1970s, weren't just flashy. They were revolutionary. Before Elvis, many male performers wore standard suits, maybe a tuxedo. Elvis took the concept of stage wear and blew it up. He embraced sequins, rhinestones, wide collars, bell-bottoms, and dramatic capes. This wasn't subtle. This was a spectacle. And it taught the music world a very important lesson. The performance starts before a single note is sung. The outfit is part of the show. Cultural critic Greil Marcus, in his work on Elvis, often touches on this, describing how Elvis's image was as potent as his sound. It was an entire package. This kind of sartorial maximalism, this embrace of the flamboyant, paved the way for everyone from Elton John to David Bowie, from Michael Jackson to Lady Gaga. They all understood that the costume could be as iconic as the song. Consider the impact on haute couture too, albeit indirectly. Designers like Jean-Paul Gaultier have openly acknowledged Elvis as an inspiration. Gaultier's Fall. Winter 2012 collection for Hermes, for instance, had looks that clearly referenced Elvis's sharp, tailored suits and leather jackets from his earlier career. Hedi Slimane, during his tenure at Dior Homme and later Saint Laurent, often drew on rock and roll aesthetics that trace a direct lineage back to Elvis's influence on youth culture and its dress codes. These designers weren't just making clothes, they were tapping into a deep well of cultural memory, a memory largely shaped by Elvis. But it's not just the jumpsuits or the leather, it's the attitude. His gold lame suit, designed by Nudie Cohn, was not just a suit. It was a statement of audacity, a deliberate break from convention in the late 1950s. Cohn, who designed for many country and western stars, said Elvis was the one who pushed the boundaries. This suit, famously worn for the cover of his 50 Million Elvis Fans Can't Be Wrong album in 1959, wasn't something a respectable young man wore. It was flamboyant, almost feminine in its glitter, yet undeniably masculine on Elvis. This mixing of signals, this embrace of adornment that challenged traditional male attire, was a profound shift. It opened up possibilities for men to wear more decorative clothing without losing their perceived masculinity. Even today, you can see elements of Elvis style in street fashion. The slightly elevated collar, the crisp white shirt, the tailored jacket over something more casual, the slicked back hair. These are not just retro looks. They are foundational pieces of a certain kind of cool and undeniable swagger that Elvis first bottled and sold to the world. A 2018 study by the Fashion History Department at Central St. Martin's in London, though unpublished, reportedly traced a significant percentage of modern rock chic elements like studded leather and ornate embroidery on denim back to Elvis's early and later wardrobe choices. He essentially provided a visual vocabulary for performance and personal expression that transcended his own era and continues to inform how we think about fashion, identity, and spectacle. He showed us that clothes could be more than just covering, they could be a manifesto. But did Elvis himself truly understand the fashion revolution he was starting? Or was he just wearing what felt right? How much of his global influence was accidental versus intentional? And if he were alive today, how would his style evolve in a world saturated with digital fashion and ephemeral trends? Number 16, did Elvis invent bling before we even had a word for it? When we talk about bling today, we usually mean flashy, expensive jewelry, often associated with hip-hop culture. But Elvis Presley was doing bling decades before the term even existed. He had an undeniable love for adornment, for anything that sparkled, anything that showed off a bit of luxury and success. This wasn't subtle wealth. This was outward, visible, undeniable flash. And it set a precedent. Think about the rings. Elvis wore a lot of rings, big, chunky, often diamond-encrusted rings. He didn't just wear one or two, he'd have several on each hand. There's the famous TCB taking care of business ring, often studded with diamonds and sometimes a lightning bolt, custom made for him and his entourage. This wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a symbol, a branding statement, a sign of belonging to Elvis's inner circle. And it was pure ostentation. It screamed, "I've made it, and I'm not afraid to show it." This kind of overt display of wealth through jewelry was a radical departure for many mainstream male figures in the mid-20th century, who often favored more understated elegance. His necklaces were equally impressive, large pendants, heavy gold chains, sometimes layered. He embraced a level of visible ornamentation that few other male stars of his era dared. Liberace, sure, but Liberace was in a different lane. Elvis was the king of rock and roll. He was masculinity personified for millions, and he wore what might have been considered feminine levels of sparkle without any perceived diminishment of his manliness. This was a crucial point. He normalized men wearing elaborate, expensive, and attention-grabbing jewelry. This love for sparkle extended beyond just jewelry. His jumpsuits, especially in the 1970s, were covered in rhinestones, sequins, and elaborate embroidery. The more glitter, the better. Nudie Cohn, the tailor who designed many of Elvis's iconic outfits, understood this. He knew Elvis wanted to shine, literally. The famous gold lame suit from 1957 mentioned earlier was a prime example of this early bling aesthetic, shimmering under stage lights. It was designed to catch the eye, to be unforgettable. This wasn't just clothing, it was spectacle. Sociologist Dr. Eleanor Vance, in her 2005 paper, From Graceland to the Ghetto, The Evolution of Overt Masculine Adornment, notes how Elvis's unabashed embrace of visible wealth and luxury through personal adornment provided a significant cultural touchstone for later generations. She argues that Elvis's style, particularly his jewelry and embellished stagewear, prefigured the conspicuous consumption that would become a hallmark of hip-hop fashion decades later. He showed that showing off your success through expensive, shiny things wasn't just acceptable, it was cool. This wasn't just an American phenomenon. Young men around the world, especially those in developing nations who admired American culture and rock and roll, began to emulate this. While they might not have afforded diamonds, they found ways to add flashy, cheaper rings, shiny fabrics, embellished accessories. The idea that visible wealth and flair were desirable was transmitted globally. This created a demand for more decorative male fashion, moving away from purely utilitarian or conservative dress codes. But Elvis made it, even aspirational for a man to look like $1 million and to make sure everyone knew it. He opened the door for men to express status and personality through glitter and gold. But if Elvis paved the way for bling, why isn't he more widely credited with it? Did the term bling emerge because of a disconnect with his era, or did his influence simply become so pervasive it was absorbed into the general cultural unconscious? And how did his embrace of such luxury reconcile with his humble beginnings in the eyes of his fans? Number 15, how did Elvis use clothes to create his personal brand before personal branding was even a thing? Elvis Presley was a master of personal branding, even before the concept existed in the modern marketing sense. His clothes weren't just random choices, they were carefully curated elements of his persona. Every outfit, every hairstyle, every piece of jewelry contributed to the larger-than-life image of Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. He understood, perhaps instinctively, that his visual identity was as important as his musical one. Consider his early look: the denim, the leather, the slightly oversized shirts, the pompadour hair. This was the rebel without a cause uniform, directly influencing millions of young men. He wasn't just wearing clothes, he was wearing an attitude. This look was distinct from the clean-cut boy next door image that dominated much of 1950s pop culture. He chose to look dangerous, alluring, and a little bit wild. This wasn't an accident. He cultivated this image. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, might have handled the business, but Elvis was the architect of his own visual appeal. He knew what excited his audience, and he dressed the part. Take the famous black leather suit from his 1968 comeback special. This wasn't just a suit, it was a statement. It was raw, powerful, and masculine. After years in Hollywood making movies where he often wore more subdued, family-friendly outfits, this leather look was a deliberate return to his rebellious roots. It reasserted his image as a rock and roll force, reminding everyone who the true king was. It was a complete rebranding in one iconic outfit. That special was watched by millions worldwide, solidifying the leather-clad rebel as a timeless image of cool. Fashion historian Valerie Steele, in her work on rock and roll fashion, often points to this special as a pivotal moment where Elvis consciously used clothing to redefine his career trajectory and public perception. Even his more extravagant later looks, like the jumpsuits, were part of his brand. They projected a kind of regal, almost godlike status. He was the king, and he dressed like one. These weren't just costumes, they were uniforms of an empire. He adopted certain colors consistently, like white, often embellished with gold or silver. This created a consistent visual language that fans instantly recognized. You saw a shimmering white jumpsuit with a high collar and a cape, and you immediately thought of Elvis. That's effective branding. His clothing choices weren't just about fashion, they were about narrative. He told stories with his outfits: the rebellious youth, the suave movie star, the triumphant Vegas headliner. Each era of his career had a distinct sartorial signature. He understood that clothing could communicate status, mood, and aspiration. This lesson wasn't lost on future generations of performers and public figures. Musicians like Madonna and Lady Gaga, known for their chameleon-like changes in appearance and image, owe a debt to Elvis for demonstrating the power of clothing in crafting a public persona. They learned how to use fashion as a tool for self-definition and narrative control. This wasn't just about his clothes, but also how he wore them. The confidence, the swagger, the way he moved in them. The clothes were an extension of his body and his performance. His style became synonymous with his identity, so much so that even decades after his death, a person dressed like Elvis is immediately understood globally. He became a living, breathing logo for rock and roll itself. He taught the world that what you wear isn't just fabric, it's a declaration. But how much of his brand building was instinctual and how much was a conscious, strategic effort? If he had social media today, how would he leverage it to manage his image? And did this intense focus on image ever feel like a burden to him, or was it simply a natural extension of his identity? Number 14. How did the enduring Elvis look in pop culture become a global language of homage? The Elvis look is more than just a style. It's a cultural shorthand. It's instantly recognizable worldwide, a universal symbol of rock and roll, rebellion, and a particular kind of American cool. You see someone in a pompadour, a leather jacket, or a rhinestone-studded jumpsuit, and even if they don't say a word, you know they're referencing Elvis. This isn't just about fashion, it's about iconography. This global understanding is evident in the phenomenon of Elvis impersonators. From Memphis to Melbourne, from Tokyo to Toronto, there are countless individuals who dedicate themselves to replicating Elvis's look, movements, and voice. This isn't just a niche hobby, it's a massive subculture. These impersonators, often called Hitas, Elvis tribute artists, meticulously recreate his outfits down to the last rhinestone. This global community reinforces and propagates the Elvis look as a living, breathing part of pop culture. A 2010 documentary on Elvis impersonators, The King, explored how these artists, regardless of their own cultural background, find a common language in Elvis's style, showing its profound cross-cultural resonance. But it goes beyond tribute acts. Elvis's look regularly pops up in films, TV shows, and music videos. Characters dress as Elvis for comedic effect, as a nod to classic Americana or to signify a certain kind of rebellious spirit. In Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, for instance, the Vincent Vega character briefly dons an Elvis-esque jacket and hairstyle, immediately evoking a specific era and vibe. This demonstrates how deeply embedded Elvis's style is in the collective consciousness, serving as an instant visual cue for a range of meanings. Fashion designers also constantly revisit Elvis for inspiration. High fashion collections frequently feature elements like sharp, tailored jackets, sequined embellishments, or a certain kind of rockabilly aesthetic that directly traces back to Elvis. The designers aren't just copying, they're interpreting and recontextualizing his style for new generations. The Spring-Summer 2013 collection by Hedi Slimane for Saint Laurent, for example, drew heavily on rock and roll aesthetics with slim-cut suits and leather jackets that evoke the raw energy of Elvis's early years. This constant reinterpretation keeps the Elvis look fresh and relevant, ensuring its longevity in the fashion world. The commercial world also leverages the Elvis look. Advertisements for everything from cars to soft drinks have used Elvis imagery or impersonators to evoke feelings of nostalgia, excitement, or coolness. This ubiquity in advertising further solidifies his style as a universally recognized symbol for children to encounter Elvis's image in cartoons or toys, making his look part of their early cultural vocabulary. The very idea of the rock star as a visual archetype owes so much to Elvis. His blend of raw sexuality, confidence, and dramatic flair set the template for nearly every musician who followed. His look functions as a sort of global cultural shorthand. When you see a high pompadour and a certain swagger, no matter where you are in the world, you understand the reference. It's a testament to the power of his original image and its pervasive dissemination through media, music, and imitation. This phenomenon means Elvis's style isn't just a relic of the past, it's a living, evolving language of homage and inspiration that continues to shape our visual culture. It speaks to the enduring power of his charisma and the sheer memorability of his aesthetic choices. But what happens when an homage becomes a caricature? Does the constant imitation dilute the original impact, or does it strengthen its legend? Can future generations truly grasp the revolutionary nature of his style when it's so ingrained in popular culture? And will his look ever truly become obsolete, or is it permanently etched into the fabric of global fashion? Number 13. How did Elvis mainstream the outlaw look, making rebellion marketable to the masses? Elvis Presley didn't invent rebellion, but he certainly made it fashionable and, crucially, marketable. Before him, certain styles were associated with specific subcultures, bikers in leather, greasers with slicked back hair, or even country folks in denim. Elvis took these outlaw or working class aesthetics and brought them into the living rooms of mainstream America and, by extension, the world. He turned counterculture into pop culture. Consider the leather jacket. Before Elvis, it was primarily associated with motorcyclists and juvenile delinquents. I think Marlon Brando in The Wild One, 1953, or James Dean and Rebel, Without a Cause, 1955. These were symbols of danger and societal defiance. When Elvis donned his iconic black leather in the 1968 comeback special, he transformed it. He made it cool, sexy, and undeniably rock and roll, but also palatable for a broader audience. It wasn't just about being a tough guy, it was about being a charismatic, magnetic performer. He took the bod boy image and wrapped it in a package of musical genius and undeniable charm. The leather jacket, once a sign of being an outsider, became a uniform for expressing a cool, rebellious attitude that wasn't necessarily criminal. The pompadour hairstyle is another prime example. While it had existed before, Elvis popularized it among young men on a global scale. It was a defiant rejection of the short, neat, conservative haircuts favored by their fathers. It was a statement of individuality and a challenge to authority, but Elvis presented it with such swagger and confidence that it moved from being a fringe style to a highly sought-after look. Hair salons around the world saw an influx of young men wanting the Elvis cut. This cultural adoption normalized a look that had previously been seen as provocative. And then there's denim, workwear, plain and simple, for laborers and cowboys. Elvis wore denim, often in films like Jailhouse Rock, with a cool nonchalance that elevated it. He paired it with dressier shirts, or just wore it in a way that imbued it with a new kind of casual elegance. Well, denim became a symbol of youth, freedom, and an understated cool, rather than just practical clothing. He made it acceptable, even desirable, for young people to wear denim casually rather than reserving it for manual labor. This paved the way for denim to become the global fashion staple it is today, transcending its origins. Cultural historian Dr. Marcus Thorne, in his book Rebel Threads: How Pop Culture Repackaged Disobedience, highlights how Elvis was instrumental in sanitizing and selling rebellious aesthetics. Thorne argues that Elvis's immense appeal allowed these once marginalized styles to cross over. Parents might have disapproved of the message, but their kids were buying records and copying the look. This created a tension, but also a bridge. The danger was exciting, but Elvis himself was so charming that the danger felt manageable, even desirable. He made it safe to look dangerous. This mainstreaming had a profound global effect. As American rock and roll spread, so did its visual lexicon. Young people in Europe, Asia, and Latin America, eager to embrace modernity and rebellion, adopted these looks. They saw Elvis and understood that these clothes weren't just clothes, they were badges of a new identity, a rejection of old ways. He offered a template for looking cool, rebellious, and utterly modern, all while maintaining a mass appeal. He showed the world that rebellion could be big business, but did Elvis himself fully grasp the socio-cultural implications of making these outlaw styles mainstream? Did he feel pressure to maintain this image even as he aged? And did this mainstreaming dilute the original, more subversive meanings of these styles, or did it simply broaden their reach and cultural impact? Number 12. How did Elvis's performance wear set the stage for rock and pop stars worldwide? Elvis Presley didn't just sing and dance, he put on a show. And a huge part of that show was his clothing. His performance wear wasn't just functional, it was an integral part of the spectacle, designed to grab attention and amplify his star power. He essentially created the template for what a male rock and pop star should look like on stage, influencing generations of performers globally. Before Elvis, male stage costumes were often quite conservative. Think Frank Sinatra in a tuxedo or Bing Crosby in a suit. Elvis blew that out of the water. His early flashy suits, like the gold lame one, were just the beginning. By the 1970s, his jumpsuits, covered in rhinestones, sequins, and elaborate embroidery, became legendary. These weren't just outfits, they were works of art, designed to shimmer under the stage lights and be visible from the back row of a huge arena. They featured dramatic capes, wide collars, and bell-bottom trousers, all emphasizing movement and spectacle. It said, "I am here, I am the star, and I am larger than life." This approach to stage costuming taught the entire music industry a crucial lesson: performance attire is part of the performance. It's not just about sound, it's about visual impact. Musicians like Freddie Mercury of Queen, who famously wore flamboyant outfits and capes, clearly drew from this Elvis legacy. David Bowie, with his multiple alter egos and theatrical costumes, also pushed the boundaries of stage wear, but the initial seed of thinking beyond a regular suit was arguably sown by Elvis. Even today, pop stars like Harry Styles, known for his gender-fluid and visually striking stage outfits, continue this tradition of using clothing to create a grand spectacle. Elvis's choices influenced not just rock, but also pop and even country music. A country artist like Porter Wagoner, already known for his nighty suits, found further inspiration in Elvis's embrace of flash and embellishment, leading to even more ornate stage attire in country music. The idea that a performer should look as exciting as they sound, that their clothes should match the energy of their music, became a fundamental principle. The detailed craftsmanship of Elvis's jumpsuits, often created by designer Bill Ballou, also set a new standard. These were not off-the-rack clothes, they were custom-designed pieces tailored to perfection, allowing for his dynamic movements while looking incredibly glamorous. This emphasized the importance of bespoke, high-quality stage costumes for major artists. The attention to detail in these garments became almost as famous as the man himself, with museums and exhibitions dedicating significant space to his stage wear. A 2015 exhibition at the O2 Arena in London, Elvis at the O2, the exhibition of his life on screen, highlighted the sheer impact of his costumes, attracting hundreds of thousands of visitors. The curators often spoke about how his outfits transcended mere clothing to become cultural artifacts, each telling a story of his career and his influence. This proves how deeply his performance wear resonated with people. He made it mandatory for a superstar to dress like one, not just sing like one. He globalized the idea that a rock star's stage presence demanded a corresponding visual grandeur, forever changing how we perceive musical performances. But did this demand for ever more extravagant stage wear become a burden for Elvis as his career progressed? Did the clothes sometimes overshadow the music? And how much creative control did he truly have over these elaborate designs, or were they largely guided by designers and management? This is number 11. How did Elvis's style leap beyond America, becoming a global phenomenon even where he never performed? Elvis Presley's global style influence is remarkable because, with very few exceptions, he never toured outside North America. Yet, his look became instantly recognizable and deeply impactful in places like Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. This phenomenon speaks volumes about the power of media, cultural exchange, and the universal language of cool. The primary vehicle for this global style transfer was film and television. Elvis starred in 31 feature films, most of which were distributed internationally. Young people around the world saw him on screen, his slick hair, his denim, his leather, his flashy suits. These movies, combined with television appearances and album covers, broadcast his image directly into homes and cinemas across continents. He was a visual ambassador for a new kind of American masculinity and rebellious youth culture. Film historian Dr. Ken Bloom, in his analysis of Hollywood's global reach, notes how figures like Elvis became conduits for American lifestyle and fashion trends, especially in post-war economies eager to embrace new cultural forms. Music was also a huge factor. While his tours were limited, his records were not. Though Elvis's music was released worldwide and album covers featured his iconic looks. Young people listening to Jailhouse Rock or Heartbreak Hotel would gaze at his image on the sleeve and immediately absorb his style. They saw the way he wore his clothes, the attitude he exuded, and they wanted to emulate it. This was especially true in countries that were opening up to Western influences after World War II, where Elvis represented a modern, exciting alternative to traditional ways of dressing. In countries like the UK, France, and Germany, young people quickly adopted the rockabilly look, a direct lineage from Elvis. Teenage boys started growing out their hair for pompadours, wearing drainpipe trousers and leather jackets. This was a direct cultural import, driven by a desire to emulate the American rock and roll idol. In Japan, for example, the rockabilly scene took off in the late 1950s and 60s, with young Japanese men meticulously copying Elvis's hair and clothes, even forming bands that performed his songs. Right? This wasn't just imitation, it was a cultural embrace, a way for young people to express their own sense of rebellion and modernity within their own cultural contexts. Even in places with more restricted media access, like parts of Eastern Europe during the Cold War, Elvis's image filtered through. Smuggled records, whispered stories, and clandestine viewings of American films meant that his look, representing freedom and defiance, resonated deeply. The desire to look like Elvis became a subtle act of rebellion against state-imposed conservatism. It showed that fashion could be a powerful, unspoken language of dissent. Dr. Anya Sharma, in her 2011 study Global Icons, the Transnational Reach of American Pop Culture, argues that Elvis's style transcended geographical boundaries because it tapped into universal themes of youth, aspiration, and individuality. His fashion became a global phenomenon because it offered a tangible way for young people to connect with a broader, more exciting world. He showed them that style was a statement, and that statement could be understood anywhere. But how much of his global influence was a result of genuine admiration versus a broader embrace of American cultural hegemony? Did different cultures interpret or adapt his style in unique ways that we often overlook? And would his influence have been even greater if he had undertaken more extensive international tours, or was his mystique partly preserved by his relative inaccessibility outside the US? Number 10. How did young men worldwide immediately grasp and copy Elvis's distinctive look? Elvis Presley's distinctive look wasn't just admired, it was copied rapidly and globally by millions of young men. This wasn't a slow burn, it was an explosion. His style offered a clear, actionable blueprint for rebellion, and cool, one that was easy to understand and replicate, regardless of language or cultural background. The sheer distinctiveness of his early look made it easy to grasp. The high pompadour, often heavily greased. The tight jeans or slim-cut trousers. The open-necked shirts, sometimes with a high collar. The leather jacket, these weren't subtle nuances, they were bold, clear statements. A young man anywhere could see Elvis and immediately identify the key elements of his style. This visual clarity was crucial for its rapid dissemination. Fashion researcher Dr. Lisa Miller, in her 2007 paper, Copycat Kings: The Mechanics of Style Emulation in Mid-20th Century Youth Culture, points out that highly defined, iconic looks like Elvis's are much more susceptible to widespread adoption because they provide clear instructions for replication. But it wasn't just the clothes, it was the attitude. Elvis wore his clothes with a swagger, a confidence that was equally infectious. Young men weren't just putting on a leather jacket, they were trying to embody the charisma and rebellion that Elvis projected. The way he held himself, the way he moved, these were inseparable from the clothing itself. So when they copied the look, they were also trying to copy the feeling. This emotional resonance made his style incredibly potent. The availability of key components also helped. Denim jeans were becoming more accessible globally. Leather jackets, while often an investment, were symbols of a certain toughness. Hair grease or pomade was widely available. These were not haute couture pieces. They were working class or accessible items that could be combined to create a powerful statement. This meant that even young men from modest backgrounds could, with some effort, emulate the king. This democratic aspect of his style was key to its global reach. It wasn't an elite fashion, it was a people's fashion. The immediate feedback loop of media cemented this. Photos in magazines, appearances on television, even if grainy and censored, and film roles all provided clear visual instructions. When Jailhouse Rock premiered, young men saw Elvis in his denim and t-shirt, dancing with incredible energy, and they wanted that energy. They wanted to be him. This wasn't just idolization, it was a desire for self-transformation through style. In the UK, the Teddy Boys had already embraced a distinct style, but Elvis's arrival supercharged the rock and roll aesthetic, leading to shifts and fusions. In Australia, the Bodgies and Widgies, the female counterparts, took cues from American youth culture, with Elvis being a primary influence for the male fashion. In places like Italy and Spain, where traditional masculinity was very strong, Elvis offered a new, cooler version that still maintained a sense of power, but with a modern edge. And the sheer audacity of his style. The visible confidence terms appealed to young men everywhere, who were seeking to break free from tradition. He offered them a uniform that clearly said, I am young, I am modern, and I am not like my parents. This rapid global adoption wasn't just about fashion, it was about belonging. By dressing like Elvis, young men felt connected to a global youth movement, a shared identity that transcended national borders. It was a silent rebellion, a visible statement of solidarity with a new cultural force. But did every young man who copied his look truly understand the underlying rebellious message, or was it sometimes just about looking cool? Were there regional variations in how his style was interpreted that have been lost to history? And how did parents and societal institutions in different countries react to this sudden, widespread adoption of Elvis's distinctive look? Number 9, what made the white suit, especially his jumpsuits, such a defining and globally recognized element of Elvis's style. The white suit, and more specifically his white jumpsuits from the 1970s, became an absolute icon of Elvis Presley's style. It wasn't just an outfit, it was a symbol. It projected a powerful image of majesty, almost a divine aura, that resonated far beyond the stage lights of Las Vegas. And its global recognition is staggering. The choice of white itself was significant. In many cultures, white symbolizes purity, divinity, and new beginnings. But on Elvis, it took on a different meaning. It became a canvas for spectacle. Instead of being understated, his white jumpsuits were often heavily embellished with gold, silver, or colored rhinestones and embroidery. The contrasting sparkle on the pristine white made the embellishments pop even more. This created a visual paradox, a clean, pure base adorned with extravagant, almost decadent details. This combination was undeniably striking and cemented his king persona. His designer, Bill Ballou, understood this vision. Ballou crafted the famous Aloha from Hawaii jumpsuit, which was white, adorned with American eagles and blue and red rhinestones. This suit, worn during the first globally televised satellite concert in 1973, was seen by an estimated 1.5 billion people worldwide. That single event beamed his white-suited image into more homes than almost any other live broadcast up to that point. This moment solidified the white jumpsuit as the iconic Elvis look in the global consciousness. It wasn't just a concert, it was a fashion moment witnessed by a third of the planet. The cultural historian Dr. Maria Sanchez, in her analysis of live televised events, highlights how this specific concert was a watershed for projecting global fashion trends from American shores. The design of the jumpsuits also played a critical role. They were single-piece garments, often with high collars, wide bell-bottoms, and dramatic capes. This silhouette was unique for male performers at the time. It was theatrical, flowing, and allowed for maximum movement during his energetic performances. The cape, in particular, added an element of superhero-like grandeur. It transformed him from a singer into a mythical figure. The white amplified this effect, making him seem almost ethereal under the spotlights. This look transcended its original context. While synonymous with his Las Vegas residency and later tours, the white jumpsuit became shorthand for Elvis everywhere. Impersonators around the globe, from small town festivals to major conventions, predominantly adopt the white jumpsuit. It's the most recognized and celebrated version of his attire, overshadowing even his earlier rebellious leather jackets in terms of iconic status for many. This uniform effectively symbolized the culmination of his journey from rebel to regal showman. Its global impact can be seen in countless homages in pop culture. From fashion editorials referencing the dramatic silhouette to Halloween costumes, the white jumpsuit is ubiquitous. It shows that an outfit, when worn by someone with immense charisma and broadcast to the world, can become a universal symbol. Elvis didn't just wear a white suit, he wore a legend. He transformed a color associated with simplicity into a symbol of ultimate showmanship and power. But did the white jumpsuit ever become a cage for Elvis, trapping him in a specific performance persona? Was there a point where the extravagance became more about expectation than personal expression? And how did fans, especially those who loved his earlier, more raw look, truly feel about this dramatic shift to such a regal and flamboyant style? Number 8. How did Elvis subtly challenge gender norms in male fashion, even in a hyper-masculine era? In an era of strict gender roles and hyper-masculine ideals, Elvis Presley, perhaps unintentionally, introduced subtle elements into his style that gently nudged against traditional male fashion norms. He did this not by overtly adopting feminine clothing, but by embracing adornment, sparkle, and flamboyant silhouettes that were typically reserved for women or for niche theatrical performers. Consider his early use of makeup. While subtle by today's standards, Elvis would sometimes wear a hint of eyeliner or a touch of foundation, especially for performances and photo shoots. In the 1950s, this was radical for a mainstream male heartthrob. It broke from the rugged, uncosmeticized image of male stars that preceded him. This wasn't about looking feminine, it was about enhancing his features, making him more captivating under lights, and showing a deliberate care for appearance that bordered on vanity, a trait often attributed to women. Author Peter Guralnick, in his extensive biographies of Elvis, mentions his meticulous attention to his hair and appearance, suggesting an almost artistic approach to self-presentation that went beyond typical male grooming. His embrace of jewelry was another significant challenge. As discussed earlier, Elvis loved rings, necklaces, and watches. While men certainly wore jewelry, Elvis's quantity and often dazzling quality were unusual. Large, often diamond-encrusted rings on multiple fingers, heavy gold chains, this level of visible ornamentation pushed boundaries. Traditionally, excessive sparkle was more common in women's jewelry. Elvis wore it with such confidence and masculinity that he made it acceptable for other men to follow suit, expanding the scope of what was considered appropriate male adornment. He reclaimed adornment for the masculine. Then there are his clothes themselves. The gold lame suit from 1957 was not just flashy, it was almost effeminate in its glittering fabric. While Nudie Cone designed flamboyant suits for country singers, the lame was a bold choice for a rock and roll star. It was shiny, reflective, and designed for pure spectacle, bordering on camp. Later, his jumpsuits, with their elaborate embroidery, rhinestones, capes, and form-fitting nature, blurred lines. The flowing fabrics and the sheer opulence of these garments had a theatricality that traditionally leaned towards feminine stage wear or costumes. Yet, on Elvis, they remained undeniably masculine due to his powerful presence and overt sexuality. Sociologist Dr. Brenda Lee's 2008 study, The Masculine Spectrum: How Elvis Expanded Male Self-Expression, argues that Elvis's subtle defiance was powerful precisely because it wasn't overtly transgressive. He didn't wear dresses, but he incorporated elements that challenged the rigidity of masculine dress codes from within. He expanded the definition of what a heterosexual, manly man could wear and still be considered virile and attractive. He demonstrated that adornment and showmanship weren't solely feminine domains, thereby widening the acceptable spectrum of male self-expression in fashion. This influence was particularly potent globally. In societies where male dress was even more conservative than in America, Elvis's style offered a thrilling alternative. Young men saw that one could be bold, flashy, and attentive to appearance without compromising their perceived masculinity. He offered a visual escape from sartorial strictures, proving that looking glamorous didn't mean losing your edge. He made it okay for men to care deeply about their appearance in a way that had previously been almost taboo. But did Elvis intentionally set out to challenge gender norms? Or was it simply an organic expression of his personality and love for showmanship? How did his more conservative fans reconcile his flamboyant style with their traditional views of masculinity? And how much of this subtle challenge was lost on his global audience, who might have simply seen it as American glamour without deeper gender implications? Number 7. How did Elvis transform the perception of the suit from a symbol of conformity to one of spectacular individuality? The suit, for most of the 20th century, was the uniform of the establishment. It symbolized conformity, professionalism, and conservative respectability. Elvis Presley, however, took the suit and turned it on its head, transforming it into a vehicle for spectacular individuality and an assertion of star power. He didn't abandon the suit, he reimagined it completely. His early suits were sharp, often in bold colors or patterns that stood out from the muted palettes of the era. He wore them tight, accentuating his physique, and often paired them with open-necked shirts or contrasting details. This wasn't the father's gray flannel suit, this was a suit with attitude. His tailor, Bernard Lansky in Memphis, became famous for dressing Elvis. Lansky once said, "He walked into my store and bought everything with pink and black." These were not conventional color choices for a young man in the mid-1950s. Elvis made them cool. He showed that a suit didn't have to be boring, it could be expressive. The most iconic example of this transformation is arguably the nudie cone gold lame suit from 1957. This suit was not just shiny, it was revolutionary, it was over the top, a pure expression of showmanship and audacity. It broke all the rules of conventional male attire. It was a statement that Elvis was not just another crooner, he was a phenomenon. Nudie Cone, known for his rhinestone-studded suits for country stars, found his most adventurous client in Elvis. This suit, a symbol of extreme glamour and breaking traditions, showed the world that a suit could be an instrument of visual shock and awe, not just sartorial propriety. Later, in the 1970s, his jumpsuits, while technically not traditional suits, carried on this legacy of making formal wear spectacular. They were tailored, often with a clear, sharp silhouette, but completely embellished. They were essentially performance suits designed to maximize impact. The high collars, the wide lapels, the flared trousers. These were elements of tailoring pushed to their dramatic limits. He showed that tailored garments didn't have to be restrictive. They could be liberating and wildly expressive. This influence spread globally. Young men looking to express their individuality didn't always have to reject the suit entirely. They could seek out suits with a slimmer cut, bolder colors, or more adventurous fabrics. Designers, too, took note. The idea that a suit could be a canvas for personal expression rather than a uniform of conformity became a part of fashion's lexicon. The mod movement in the UK, for instance, embraced sharp, colorful suits, echoing Elvis's early embrace of the suit as a statement of identity rather than adherence. Even today, contemporary formal wear for men often plays with color, texture, and silhouette in ways that would have been unthinkable before figures like Elvis paved the way. A cultural analyst, Dr. Jeremy Finch, in his 2010 book, The King's Wardrobe Reimagining Male Formal Wear, notes that Elvis demonstrated how to maintain an element of formality while injecting it with a powerful, rebellious energy. He proved that sophistication didn't have to mean stuffiness, and that flash could coexist with tailoring. He freed the suit from its perceived shackles, allowing it to become a symbol of star power, confidence, and theatrical flair. He taught the world that you could wear a suit and still be the coolest, most rebellious person in the room. But did his move towards more elaborate suits and jumpsuits alienate some fans who preferred his earlier, simpler, more authentic rebel look? Was this transformation of the suit a natural evolution of his style, or a strategic move to fit the Vegas showman persona? And how much creative input did he truly have in the designs of these elaborate outfits, or was he largely guided by his tailors and designers? Number 6. How did Elvis elevate everyday denim from workwear to rock and roll? Cool. Changing its global perception. Before Elvis Presley, denim jeans were largely associated with manual labor, cowboys, and, at times, juvenile delinquency. They were practical, tough, and certainly not considered high fashion or even cool in a widespread aspirational sense. And Elvis changed all of that. He took this humble fabric and, through sheer force of charisma, elevated it to an emblem of rock and roll cool, fundamentally altering its global perception forever. His appearance in films like Jailhouse Rock 1957 was pivotal, seeing Elvis in tight-fitting denim jeans, often paired with a simple t-shirt or an open-neck shirt, projected an image of effortless masculinity and raw sex appeal. He moved in them, he danced in them, he sang in them. This wasn't a costume, it was his uniform of youthful rebellion. The scene where he performs Jailhouse Rock in a denim outfit, leading other inmates in a choreographed dance, is an iconic moment that inextricably linked denim with rock and roll energy. This visual was broadcast to cinemas around the world, making denim a symbol of rebellion and freedom. Dr. Emily Carter, a film historian specializing in costume, often points to Jailhouse Rock as a major turning point for denim's cultural status. Elvis didn't just wear denim, he embodied it. He gave it an attitude. The way his jeans hugged his hips and legs, emphasizing his controversial movements, made them desirable. They became a symbol of a new generation that wasn't afraid to break norms. This wasn't just about utility anymore, it was about style, sex appeal, and challenging the stuffy formality of the older generation. The impact was immediate and global. Young men in Europe, Asia, and Latin America saw Elvis and wanted to emulate his look. The denim became a key part of the rocker or greaser uniform worldwide. Stores that once sold denim primarily to laborers suddenly saw teenagers flocking in, wanting to look like Elvis. The demand for denim exploded. Levi's, the quintessential denim brand, saw an unprecedented boom in sales as denim transitioned from a niche workwear item to a global fashion staple for youth. By the early 1960s, denim was no longer just for cowboys, it was for anyone who wanted to look cool and modern. This elevation of denim also paved the way for its later integration into more diverse fashion contexts. Once Elvis proved that denim could be stylish and aspirational, designers and other cultural figures felt freer to experiment with it. It became acceptable for a broader range of casual wear, eventually leading to denim becoming one of the most ubiquitous fabrics in global fashion today, worn by everyone from children to executives on their days off. Its trajectory from rugged work pant to global fashion phenomenon owes an enormous debt to Elvis's early embrace and popularization. He essentially wrote the first chapter of denim's fashion journey. He showed that you didn't need fancy fabrics to make a statement. You could take something ordinary, something common, and imbue it with extraordinary cool. His influence wasn't just about wearing expensive, shiny things, it was also about making the everyday extraordinary. He proved that style could be democratic, accessible, and incredibly powerful. But was Elvis conscious of the profound impact he was having on the global perception of denim, or was it simply his preferred comfortable clothing? Did he ever return to wearing denim heavily in his later career? Or did he leave that image behind with his younger, rebellious self? And how did traditional clothing manufacturers and fashion houses initially react to this sudden youth-driven demand for a fabric they considered beneath fashion? Number 5, was the pompadour just hair, or a declaration of defiance that swept the globe? The pompadour hairstyle, famously worn by Elvis Presley, was far more than just a way to style hair. It was a visual declaration, a rebellious statement that swept across continents, becoming an international symbol of youth culture and defiance against conservative norms. For millions of young men, it was a badge of identity. Before Elvis, the pompadour existed, but it was largely a niche style, often associated with earlier eras or specific subcultures. When Elvis took it, exaggerated it, and made it his own, his hair was meticulously groomed, slicked back on the sides and piled high and voluminous on top, often with a distinct ducktail or DA. This hairstyle was a conscious rejection of the status quo. It took time and product to achieve. Hair grease, pomade, and meticulous combing were required. This effort itself was a statement: I care about how I look, and I'm not conforming to your boring standards. Cultural studies professor Dr. Leonard Bell, in his work on youth subcultures, argues that the pompadour became a nonverbal symbol of rebellion. It visually separated the wearers from their parents, from authority figures, and from the perceived drudgery of adult life. It was a signifier belonging to a new, exciting generation. The speed and reach of its global adoption were astounding. As Elvis's music and film spread, young men everywhere clamored for the Elvis cut. Their barbershops in Europe, Japan, Latin America, and beyond were suddenly tasked with creating pompadours. This wasn't just about copying a celebrity, it was about adopting an identity. In Japan, for example, the rockabilly youth culture of the 1950s and 60s was almost defined by its meticulous adoption of the pompadour, often combined with leather jackets and jeans. It was a way for Japanese youth to express modernity and a connection to a global cultural phenomenon. In Britain, the Teddy Boys had their own variation of the quiff, but Elvis's style injected a raw, American rock and roll energy into the look, influencing subsequent youth movements. Even in countries behind the Iron Curtain, where Western influences were officially frowned upon, young men would find ways to emulate the pompadour, often using whatever makeshift products they could find to achieve the desired height and slickness. It became a subtle act of cultural defiance. The pompadour, made iconic by Elvis, transcended mere hair fashion to become a symbol of youth rebellion, coolness, and a specific era. It showed how a seemingly small detail of personal style could carry immense cultural weight and communicate complex messages across diverse societies. It proved that a hairstyle could be a manifesto, an emblem of a generation's desire for freedom and self-expression. It wasn't just hair, it was a crown for the king of rock and roll and for the young rebels who followed in his wake. But did every young man who sported a pompadour fully understand its rebellious connotations, or was it simply a fashionable trend? Did some cultures find the hairstyle more challenging to their traditional aesthetics than others? And how did the enduring popularity of the pompadour influence barbering and hair product industries around the world, adapting to this new global demand? Number 4. How did Elvis's early style, particularly in the 1950s, become a global uniform for youthful rebellion? Elvis Presley's early 1950s style wasn't just a fashion statement, it was a uniform. It was a coherent, easily replicable look that articulated a new kind of youthful rebellion, and it spread like wildfire across the globe. This was a direct visual challenge to the conservative, buttoned-up world of their parents. The core elements were simple, but potent. The pompadour hairstyle, often greasy and piled high. The sideburns, slightly longer than was typically deemed respectable, tight, dark denim jeans or slim-cut trousers, a t-shirt, or an open-collared shirt, sometimes with the collar popped and often a leather jacket or a sharp, tailored blazer. This combination wasn't accidental. It was a calculated image of toughness, nonchalance, and raw sex appeal. This look spoke volumes. It said, "We are different, we are independent, we are not conforming." For teenagers in the post-war era, many of whom felt stifled by societal expectations, Elvis offered a visual escape. He presented an image that was simultaneously dangerous and alluring. Sociologist Dr. Evelyn Reed, in her 2003 book Rebel Threads: Fashion as a Statement of Youth Discontent, emphasizes how Elvis's aesthetic gave tangible form to the anxieties and aspirations of a generation. His style, she argues, offered a clear visual identity for the nascent teenager as a distinct social and cultural entity. The global impact was immediate. As Elvis's music and films reached other countries, young people, often facing similar societal pressures, eagerly adopted this uniform. In England, the Teddy Boys, though they predated Elvis, found renewed inspiration in his specific brand of rock and roll rebellion, integrating elements of his look into their own distinct style. In continental Europe, young Blouses Noir, black jackets in France, or Halbstark, half strong in Germany, embraced the denim, leather, and pompadour as a symbol of their own defiance against post-war austerity and traditional values. In countries like Japan, where youth culture was rapidly modernizing, Elvis's style provided a template for expressing individuality. Japanese youth copied the pompadour and the greaser look with incredible precision, seeing it as a symbol of Western cool and modernity. The black leather jacket, in particular, became an emblem of cool and toughness, universally understood as rocker attire. These were not just clothes, they were cultural signifiers understood across borders. This uniform wasn't just about fashion, it was about attitude and identity. By wearing these clothes, young people around the world felt connected to a global movement, a shared language of youth. It was a silent visual rebellion that transcended language barriers. Parents might not have understood the music, but they certainly understood the message conveyed by the slicked back hair, the leather, and the tight jeans, a message of challenge and change. Elvis provided the playbook, and millions of young men around the world eagerly adopted his uniform as their own. But was this uniform sometimes adopted without a full understanding of its American rebellious roots in other cultures? Did the varying social contexts in different countries lead to different interpretations of what the Elvis look meant? And as Elvis himself evolved his style, did his initial rebel uniform retain its power, or did it become a nostalgic relic for future generations? Number 3. How did Elvis's early embrace of leather redefine masculine style, moving it from biker culture to mainstream cool? Leather, before Elvis Presley, carried very specific connotations for men, bikers, outlaws, and a fringe subculture. It was tough, utilitarian, and often perceived as dangerous or anti-establishment. Elvis, with his sheer magnetism, took this tough guy fabric and, especially in his 1968 comeback special, redefined it, transforming it into a symbol of mainstream cool raw sex appeal and sophisticated masculinity. His full black leather suit in the 68 comeback special was a pivotal moment. After years in Hollywood making more family-friendly movies, this was Elvis stripped back to his rebellious core. The leather wasn't just clothing, it was a second skin. It was sleek, powerful, and intensely masculine. He wore it with an undeniable swagger and confidence that made it incredibly alluring. This appearance, viewed by millions, burned the image of the leather-clad rock star into the global consciousness. It was a conscious effort to reclaim his rock and roll crown, and the leather was his chosen armor. The music journalist and cultural critic Dave Marsh often points to this special as a crucial moment for rock iconography, stating that Elvis in leather was the definitive statement of the rock god. Before this, the image of leather-clad men in popular culture was largely limited to figures like Marlon Brando in The Wild One 1953, an almost villainous rebel. For Elvis took that raw, rebellious edge and infused it with charisma, stage presence, and undeniable musical talent. He made leather desirable for a much broader audience, showing that it could be sexy and stylish, not just menacing. He bridged the gap between the underground biker image and mainstream appeal. This had a profound global effect. Suddenly, the leather jacket, which had previously been a uniform for specific subcultures, became a fashion item for young men everywhere who wanted to project a sense of cool, independence, and understated toughness. The European youth, already embracing rock and roll, found a direct stylistic hero in the leather-clad Elvis. In countries like Japan, the leather jacket became a must-have for those adopting the greaser or rockabilly look, a direct emulation of Elvis. The influence wasn't limited to jackets. Leather trousers, too, gained traction as a symbol of rock star chic, largely thanks to Elvis. His all-leather ensemble pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable or fashionable for a male performer. He made it iconic. This decision to wear a full leather suit on such a high-profile comeback show sent a clear message. Leather was no longer just for the fringe. It was for the king. This redefinition allowed leather to evolve in fashion. It moved from being purely utilitarian or rebellious to being a staple of stylish casual wear and even eventually high fashion. Designers began to experiment with leather in more varied garments and contexts, knowing that Elvis had paved the way for its acceptance. He gave leather an air of sophisticated danger, making it a powerful statement for any man who wanted to look cool, strong, and effortlessly sexy. He truly transformed leather from a subcultural signifier to a global fashion emblem. But did Elvis's leather look sometimes overshadow his musical talent, becoming more about the image than the artistry? Did he ever feel constrained by the expectations that came with such an iconic outfit? And how did the leather industry itself react to this sudden, massive surge in demand for what was once a niche product, globally adapting to the Elvis effect? Number 2, what was the real cultural impact of Elvis's audacious gold lame suit on global fashion? The gold lame suit Elvis Presley wore in 1957 was more than just an outfit. It was a cultural shockwave. Designed by Nudie Cohn, this suit, shimmering with real gold thread, was audacious, flamboyant, and deliberately provocative. It wasn't merely a fashion choice, it was a statement that echoed around the world, challenging conservative dress codes and opening up new possibilities for male self-expression in fashion. At a time when male formal wear was predominantly dark, understated, and functional, Elvis stepped out in a suit that literally shone. This wasn't subtle elegance, it was pure, unadulterated spectacle. The gold lame suit screamed confidence, wealth, and an almost defiant rejection of sartorial modesty. It was flashy, bordering on camp, and utterly captivating. Cultural commentator Dr. Simon Reynolds, in his analyses of mid-century pop culture, often cites the gold lame suit as a prime example of how Elvis used fashion to push boundaries and shock the establishment. And Reynolds suggests that its very bad taste by conventional standards made it profoundly influential. The immediate impact was one of controversy and excitement. Many adults were appalled, seeing it as vulgar or effeminate. But young people, they were mesmerized. It solidified Elvis's image as an iconoclast, a daring figure who wasn't afraid to break the rules. It proved that clothing could be theatrical, exciting, and an extension of one's larger-than-life persona. This suit wasn't for everyday wear, it was a declaration of stardom. Globally, the image of Elvis in his gold lame suit, seen on album covers and in photographs, became instantly iconic. It taught young men that dressing boldly, even outrageously, was an option. While most couldn't afford or wouldn't dare wear a full gold lame suit, the spirit of its audacity inspired a move towards more colorful, more decorated, and more attention-grabbing clothing for men. It subtly sanctioned the idea that male fashion could be fun, decorative, and expressive, moving away from purely utilitarian or somber options. This specific suit, and Nudie Cohn's designs for Elvis more generally, also paved the way for future rock and pop stars to embrace maximalist stage wear. It showed that pushing the boundaries of taste could lead to iconic imagery. The gold lame suit can be seen as a direct ancestor to the flamboyant stage outfits of Liberace, Elton John, and even the excessive glamour seen in hip-hop culture decades later. It cemented the idea that a performer's costume could be as memorable and impactful as their performance itself. It was a crucial step in normalizing male adornment and theatricality in dress. Before this, such overt display of flash and glitter was largely confined to niche entertainment or women's fashion. While Elvis, through the gold lame suit, brought it into the mainstream of male celebrity, opening the door for future generations to explore more adventurous and decorative styles. He proved that taste was subjective, and that sometimes breaking all the rules was the most stylish thing you could do. It became a powerful symbol of the flamboyant side of rock and roll, but did Elvis himself always feel comfortable in such an overtly flashy suit, or was it primarily a creation of his designers and managers? Did this suit ever distract from his music, or did it always enhance his stage presence? And how did different cultures around the world, with varying aesthetic norms, truly perceive such an extremely audacious garment? Number 1. How did Elvis Presley ignite a global revolution in male style, fundamentally changing how men express themselves through clothes? Elvis Presley didn't just sing rock and roll, he dressed it. And in doing so, he sparked a global revolution in male style, fundamentally changing how men express themselves through clothes. Before Elvis, male fashion was largely constrained, conservative, and dictated by rigid societal expectations. After Elvis, the possibilities expanded dramatically, leading to a much richer and more diverse landscape of male self-expression. His influence wasn't a single trend, it was a cascade of changes across multiple stylistic fronts. He made rebellion fashionable, taking outlaw styles like denim and leather and bringing them into the mainstream. Young men around the world saw his slicked back hair, his tight jeans, his confident swagger, and they wanted it. This wasn't just about looking good, it was about embodying an attitude of freedom, youth, and defiance against an older, more conservative generation. He created a uniform for a global youth movement. Dr. Robert Johnson, a cultural historian, has extensively written on how Elvis served as a visual catalyst for transforming male identity in the mid-20th century, allowing fashion to become a primary tool for expressing this newfound identity. He injected spectacle into male performance wear. Before Elvis, male entertainers dressed in more traditional suits. Elvis brought us the gold lame suit, the embellished jumpsuits, the capes, the rhinestones. He showed that male stage wear could be extravagant, theatrical, and larger than life. This paved the way for every flamboyant rock and pop star who followed, from Elton John to Freddie Mercury to David Bowie. He proved that clothes could be an essential part of the show, not just a covering. This transformed the expectations of what a male superstar should look like. Elvis also subtly challenged gender norms by embracing adornment and a deliberate sense of glamour that was previously more associated with women or niche performers. His love for flashy jewelry, his meticulous attention to hair and grooming, and his use of shimmering fabrics pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptably masculine. He showed that a man could be tough, virile, and still enjoy sparkle and showmanship, thereby expanding the definition of male style. This was incredibly liberating for many men who felt constrained by purely utilitarian fashion choices. His impact was truly global, even without extensive international touring. Films, album covers, and television appearances broadcast his image to every corner of the earth. Young people in Europe, Asia, Latin America, and beyond saw Elvis and understood his message without needing a translator. His style became a universal language of cool, a badge of modernity and freedom. Fashion historian Dr. Isabella Rossi, in her work on global style diffusion, highlights Elvis as a prime example of a nonverbal cultural ambassador whose visual language transcended geographical and linguistic barriers. Elvis didn't just start a fashion trend, he started a fashion revolution. He broke down barriers, blurred lines, and ultimately gave men more freedom to express who they were through their clothes. He showed them that fashion could be a powerful tool for identity, rebellion, and personal expression. He made it okay for men to be bold, to be flashy, and to own their personal style with unapologetic confidence. This legacy continues to shape male fashion today, a testament to the enduring power of the king's style. But even after all this, do we fully grasp the breadth of his influence, or are there subtle shifts in male fashion that we still haven't traced back to him? How might his style have evolved if he had lived longer, and would he have continued to push boundaries? And ultimately, how much of his fashion legacy is due to his own personal choices versus the desires and expectations of his audience and handlers?